Welcome back to the OurView Podcast. On today's episode, I welcome my guest, Nathan Todd, the loneliness coach. Our conversation today spans many different topics. We talk about the importance of human connections, inspiration porn, and also what it means to have pride in our disabilities. We hope you enjoy this conversation. I would like to welcome everyone back to another episode of the OurView Podcast, where we aim to educate, raise awareness, and change the tone of conversation. I am happy to welcome my guest today, Nathan Todd, to the podcast. So welcome to the podcast, Nathan.
All right, man. It's good to actually see your face. Usually I just hear your voice, so it's good to see your face, my friend.
Yes, I didn't even think of that. You and we met on Clubhouse, and it's a voice app, so you do hear people's voices all the time, but you see their picture, but you never see them doing live movement. So yeah, so we're recording this video and audio. So it is good to see you live and in action.
Yeah, man.
So Nathan and I, as I said, we met on Clubhouse, and I've mentioned it before here on my podcast that there has been. I know I joined in December of 2020 to the Clubhouse app, and I immediately recognized the large disability community that is on the app. And one of the big things that the disability community within the app is trying to do is improve the accessibility features of the app. And it's bringing to the forefront of other people's minds the inaccessibility of apps, Instagram, Clubhouse, Facebook, all of those social media apps that everybody often uses, and just how inaccessible they are for those who have vision and hearing impairments. So, just within the last few months, I know for myself, I've noticed that Facebook and Instagram, they have now auto captions for their videos, which is something that really didn't exist before. You had to use a third-party app to caption your videos. So now they have auto captions that's available on most of the videos that you will post. And just the conversations around accessibility and all topics related to disability within Clubhouse have been really eye-opening. I've really connected with some great people. And so Nathan, again, I'm very happy to have you here today, and I'm excited for our topic of conversation.
Yeah, I love where you took that right now, because the one thing that it made me think of is like that through the journey of Clubhouse, one of the best things that ever happened, and it started with the disability community, and then it became an accepted practice for the app specifically, is the fact of saying, this is Nathan, I'm complete, and so you actually can know who's speaking. That was a big thing for me that I noticed, and I think one of the things that helped was during the early adoption phase, there were so many people with disabilities who, for whatever reason, they were like, hey, let's try this out and let's see what happened. And I also think that there were lots of opportunities where we were like, here's an opportunity for me to show you how we can make this more inclusive. And it wasn't actually from an angry space. It was like, hey, I just want to be a part of this conversation. These are great conversations, and this will help me greatly.
Yeah, it really is. It's really brought to my attention some of the things that I wasn't even doing to make my own content more accessible for those with vision and hearing impairments. So it's Clubhouse has been really great. Like I said, it's introduced me to great people like yourselves and some previous guests that I've had on the podcast, and so it's really done a great job of bringing everybody together. So, I would like to get started with you introducing yourself and telling everybody who is Nathan Todd.
Oh, great question, Art. Who is Nathan Todd? Well, man, I'm just a dude who was born 8 weeks premature, 4 pounds, 10 ounces, uh, diagnosed with cerebral palsy at the age of 2, didn't learn to walk until I was 4. Um, and so, because of that, I have a mission to eradicate loneliness in the world. And when I say that, and it seems big even for myself, and realistically, it's not about having loneliness not exist, because I think loneliness is a very important part of actually the human experience. What it's about for me is giving people the tools and the awareness that they can shift out of anything being chronic and lasting for long periods of time, so that you can be like, oh, I'm lonely right now. What do I do? Oh, let me give Nathan a call real quick. I know he'll pick up and he'll talk to me. But my experience of living with a disability definitely kind of led me on this path. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, I wouldn't be here doing this. But I am now.
Wow, that's really great, and I can't wait to get into more about what led you to being interested in loneliness. And I know for myself, I can talk about that as well, having a disability and how that has impacted, uh, my mental health and all of that kind of stuff. So looking forward to that part of our conversation for sure. But first, can you tell us a little bit more about your cerebral palsy diagnosis and how it impacts your life on a daily basis?
Yeah. So I have spastic diplegia, cerebral palsy. And so the way that that impacts me the most on a daily basis is the tightness in my muscles and any type of motor skill movement, whether it's big movements or small movements. Those are the things that really get impacted on a day-to-day basis. And so things like standing, walking for long periods of time, those can be impacted. And, it's interesting. The one thing that I would say, and that just saying that brought up for me, is the idea that I used to never want to use a wheelchair. Never, never, never. Because my thought process was, I can walk, so why am I not walking? And it took a long time until I was in my 20s, and my mom had a conversation with me, and it just landed at that time of, she said, well, so Nathan, would you rather prove that you can do something, or would you rather enjoy the time that you're with the people that you're with? And it was like, mm, yeah, uh, do I want to waste my time trying to prove something, or do I want to just go hang out with my friends and not be tired all the time and be present? Because, man, when you deal with chronic pain all the time, it's very easy to not be present. And I can tell you, I'll speak for myself, I can become a master disassociator and just step outside of the situation. And that's not necessarily good for anybody to do that for long periods of time. So
Yeah, that is I love what your mom's what your mom said to you. That is really so true. I tell people all the time with my walking on my crutches, I walk with crutches and wear leg braces. And because my leg muscles don't quite work. I have to use my core to move. That gets very tiring very quickly because
Hmm.
you can't quite tighten your core to move and breathe all at the same time. So I tell people all the time, if you put me in my wheelchair, I can go for days. I've wheeled from, just about one end of Manhattan to the other with my friends walking next to me. And, I'm not tired. And like you said, being present and not really having to worry about being out of breath and just being exhausted before you get to your destination. So, yeah, that's really, really great what your mom said and how you were able to take it and really apply it to yourself. So that's really, really great. Wow.
And let's be for real though. Let's be for real. That took a long time, and she probably said that about a bajillion times. So I just want to be clear. If there's some kid that's listening to this, hey, you're probably not gonna listen the first bajillion times you hear it. So know that that's okay.
That's so true. And as you were saying before you even said it, I was going to say that you didn't accept it the first time.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not how it goes, but but you did get it eventually, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, I knew you were going to say that right before you said it. Like, yeah, he didn't wasn't well received the first time.
No, I'm pretty hard headed a lot of times there, Art.
Well, I think we all can be, which is, a good and bad thing. But for me, I think, the hard-headed part for me comes in partly because of my parents, because they taught me how to be so strong and be so, determined to reach goals and achieve things. And, so I think it is I blame them, yes. But they taught me that I
Now,
could do
now,
things.
Art, come on, Art. Did you not see what I posted yesterday?
I
I
did.
said everything is not happening to you; it's happening through you. So
Yes.
it is not their fault.
No, it's not. Yes, you are absolutely right. It's happening through me for sure. But so you did mention your mission uh to eradicate loneliness, and your name is the Loneliness Coach. Is that correct?
Yeah, you got it, man.
So can you tell us a little bit more about how you became interested in looking at loneliness and how it affects people? And it's so funny that I created a version of that question, and then you and I both opened up our Instagram stories a few days ago for some of our followers to submit questions for this interview, and that was one of the questions that someone asked as well. So, how did you become interested in loneliness and how it affects people?
Yeah, I was sitting in a coaching session, and the coach asked me, "What do you believe is happening for a lot of your friends that nobody's talking about?" And um, I said, I think that a lot of times we'll be experiencing loneliness and we'll be going through a hard time, and yet we will do all the surface level BS, and we'll go have a drink and we'll go do stuff, but we won't really talk about what's happening in life. And so I was like, a lot of my friends, they're they're engineers. Like that's the profession that they've gone into, and for some reason, I've always felt like I'm like a human engineer. Like I'm an engineer to figure out the human experience. But that happened even longer before that question even got asked to me. It just happened in my life experience. Like my life experience was preparing me for this moment. And back in 2008, that's when I graduated college, and the world was going crazy. We were in a recession, but I had done everything. All right, I checked every box. I was doing what life I was supposed to do. And then I graduated college, and that's when, like, the societal reality of what it meant to live with a disability was like, boom, punched in the face. And it's like, oh, okay, your parents may have taught you these things and modeled these things, but they're in the minority of the way society views you. And for a whole year, man, I would nail phone interviews. I had so many phone interviews. I'd make it to the second in-person interview, and within 5 minutes, it's like, oh, there's the reality. And I'm not trying to, like, this isn't even about the other person sitting across from me doing the interview. It's definitely it's what everybody's seen. And when you don't spend a lot of time with people with disabilities, how are you going to know how to interact or what to say? I think that experience of 2008 to 2009, I do an exercise where I have you envision what loneliness looks like for you. And for me, it's like sitting on that couch being like, well, is the expectation, I graduated college, but I think the expectation is that I'm going to sit at home on my couch and collect a check for the rest of my life. And mind you, I've never been on Social Security my entire life. Right. But everybody makes that assumption because it's so closely tied to just saying that you have a disability.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. And my mind was quite blown when you said how, what your parents taught you and modeled for you is not the way that the outside world, thinks of you. I grew up in a very large family and at the same time a very small community. So all of my friends were either part of my small community that I grew up in, or they were my cousins. So it was like, okay, everybody there in those two groups accepted me. And, they were willing to get to know me and get to be my friend and all of those things. And then, like you said, you get out in the real world, you're just like, oh, shit, wait a minute. Like, that's not. It's not how everybody views people with disabilities. It's not the norm for for how people view us as people who live with disabilities. And it goes back to also what you said, that I think when people don't have those interactions and those experiences with those who have disabilities, that's where it comes from. They don't know how to respond to us. And because there is that stereotype of, again, as you said, yeah, I'll go to school and then I'll sit on the couch and I'll live in the house and I'll collect the check for the rest of my life, because that's what people with disabilities do. They don't do anything, or they do very minimal. And that's a big reason. I say it all the time. That's a big reason why I created my OurView company, because I want to change that tone of conversation. Let's get a new perspective on people with disabilities. Let's see every person, first of all, as an individual. And just because I have spina bifida and your relative or your other friend has spina bifida, we're not the same. We have very different everything. Everything about us can be totally different, but we have that one diagnosis.
Wait. Yeah, pause right there, because I want to ask you a question, and it goes back to our intro. So, were you in the room? It was a We the Future room very early on where we were talking about inspiration. And I actually said that exact same thing. I was like, one of the most common misconceptions is that we all know each other.
Mm-hmm.
like specific to our disability in general. So, I know every person with cerebral palsy, and that's a common. They'll have a friend that also has cerebral palsy, and they'll be like, Nathan, do you know so and so? I'm like, no. Are they in South Carolina? No, I don't really. No, sorry, I don't. We don't
Oh,
have special cards in the special club where we talk to each other every month.
right. Except now we do on Clubhouse, but but yeah, it is. It's so true. All of these negative and outdated stereotypes that exist about people with disabilities that have gone on, I guess, for decades, if not centuries, that still exist, and people still feel this way about us. And
Mm.
it's really time to change all of that. And as I mentioned earlier, I can also relate to, thankfully, I've been um, very vocal, more so as I got older, not so much when I was a child. But if I'm having a bad day, I'll say it. I'll say it to my close friends and family, and it just won't be a general or a cop out statement of, oh, I can't go out, or it's, oh, I can't go out because my body really hurts today, or I have to go
Yeah,
home because my back is really tightening up on me and I need to lay down in a bed. It's more so than sitting in my wheelchair. I need to lay down and stretch everything out. So it's great when you can have those communities of people in your life that you can be honest with, to share that with, and especially within the last year and a half with the pandemic and everybody being pretty much isolated from each other. And I live by myself, and so it was nice to just say, like, I need to get out of the house. Can I come sit in your backyard?
hmm,
Can we order sandwiches, and can we sit in your backyard and just talk for a little bit? Like, I need to get out of my house. It's I love myself and I enjoy my own company, but my goodness, I'm getting bored right now.
yeah,
And then, like, talking with you, it's like now I can say, like, yes, it was getting lonely. It was getting lonely in here. Like, it was rough. But I had those people that I could just say that to. And it's like, hey, if you're free, which I know you are because everybody's free, nobody's doing anything. Can I
yeah,
come over tomorrow or the next day and just sit and hang out in your backyard for a little bit, or can we meet at the park and just talk for a little bit? And FaceTime get boring and phone calls are great, but after a while you need that to actually see a person in their physical in their physical form. So it really, it's great the work that you're doing, and I'm very glad to see all the work that you're doing, and experience that. So thank you for sharing all of that with us.
yeah, man. So I wish that I just had like this magic thing where I could just automatically switch t-shirts every time you bring up a topic, because like when you're talking about the outdated model, one of the things that um I love to wear like my thoughts and kind of the things I stand for in my clothing. And so one of my shirts says, hey, you don't have to be a motivational speaker or a Walmart greeter. And I think that is like also a narrative when it comes to employment for people with disabilities, that those are like the two boxes
Right.
that you get put in. And here's the thing, so many people, and I know we'll talk about this, so I'm just kind of like prepping, but so many people say you're motivational, you're inspirational, and that is what people hear all the time. They don't actually realize what it actually takes to be a speaker, like how hard that shit is to actually create something that's sustainable and that's meaningful for that type of business. But I say that to say there's so much in between those two things that you probably have a gift in, but you've been told so many times it's either one or the other. What are you going to go do? Or are you going to be the person that ends up sitting on the couch? That there's so much missed opportunity in that in between.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a actual perfect segue into our main topic of why I asked one of the reasons why I asked you to participate in this conversation, and that is the word, the phrase inspiration. So, um, as I mentioned, you and I have been on the Clubhouse app for the last few months or so, and there have been a lot of conversations surrounding the word inspiration and the fact that people with disabilities are often said that they are an inspiration. And oftentimes it's by strangers, people they've never met, when they are doing just their daily routine of going to the store, food shopping, or clothes shopping at the mall. So I would love to talk with you about your thoughts about when people call you an inspiration and this idea of inspiration porn, and what types of feelings does that bring up for you whenever people say that you're an inspiration and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Let's start from the beginning, right? Because I think I feel like I'm on the opposite end of a lot of our community in this topic, but it didn't start there. I used to get really, really frustrated when I would hear you're an inspiration. Like, and I would be doing those exact things that you were talking about. I'd be going to the grocery store, getting groceries, or who knows, maybe I'm standing in the line at the bank, or I'm just going out to get the mail and somebody happens to be walking by and they just see it and they're like, you're such an inspiration. So I used to get really angry and really upset when people would use that phrase. I'm like, uh, I'm just living my life. How's that inspiring? Right? And I'm sure many people can relate to that. But here's what happened, man. That's a huge, that's, I just gotta be as blunt. That's a fucking waste of energy for me to say, Art, you can't call me an inspiration. That's not inspirational. Well, how the hell do I know what's inspiring to Art? How do I even know what's inspiring about someone seeing me walk into the store? Because you know what? Probably most of the time, they're wondering in their mind, I wonder what would happen if that was me. In my own perception of myself, would I have the energy, the whatever to be able to get up and go do what that person is doing right now? And um like I just decided I'm not gonna I'm not gonna get angry because you think something in my way of being was inspiring for you. I hope that you use that feeling to go create something for yourself and that it moves you to take more action. And I hate to say this, but I'm going to say like inspiration porn, right? You know, most people without disabilities have no fucking clue what you're talking about. Like, I think we also put ourselves on a pedestal when we start talking about that stuff and thinking that everybody knows what the hell you're talking about. Nobody knows.
You're right. You're right. Nobody really knows what that is. I've said it and brought it up to people, and they're just like, "Huh?" Like, what is it? And then you have to explain it to them, and it's just like, oh, okay. So it's they then understand, but yeah, on the surface, nobody really knows what that means.
No.
And I love what you said. You don't know what is inspiring to that person who's saying it. Um, and there is something about you or I or whoever it is with the disability. There's something about the way that we are showing up and doing things that is that speaks to them. And the last part of one of the last things that you said, just I hope that them being inspired by me does encourage them to do something, to put it into action somehow for themselves. Take that, and if it helps you get through a rough day because you saw me and you remembered me, like, great, thank you. Like, i'm
Mhm.
i'm glad I could provide that for you. So I also don't have an issue with being called an inspiration. It happens, and I know again, we opened up our Instagram stories and asked people for uh, different questions or comments that they had, and you sent me two screenshots of people that said you were an inspiration because of something you posted earlier this week. So it happens all the time, and for myself, I don't mind at all. Um, and it actually, almost in a, I don't want to say a strange kind of way, but it also, it kind of gives me a boost. It gives me a
Mhm.
boost of energy, when it's like, oh wow, like, okay, like, that's cool. I think it's really cool that somebody said they saw me. And as I said, I use a wheelchair, and I drive a car. So if I'm putting my chair in my car, it comes apart like a transformer. The wheels pop off, the back folds down, and then I have to lift it up into the back of my car. So if somebody sees that and says, like, wow, that was really impressive, how you did that so fast and just so, with ease, like, that's really impressive. Like, that's so inspiring that you drive or that you do things on your own. And people, I've had neighbors that see me walking into my house and they're just like, wow, like, oh, so you live on your own. Again, I think it goes back to what we were saying, old stereotypes of people with disabilities either being in institutions or being kept in the house and hidden away
Yeah.
from people. Um, but it's just like, okay, like, at least they can see through me that things are changing, hopefully.
Well,
A
and
long way to go.
in that moment, you have a choice.
Hmm.
You have a choice, and I think that's my main thing about all this is like you have a lot of personal power in how you show up and demonstrate in the world. So in that moment of your neighbor saying, "Oh, you live alone," you can go one of two ways. You can be like, "Well, how dare you don't think that I live alone? What are you thinking?"
Right.
Or you can just be like, "Yeah, man, I've lived here for X number of years. It's a
Hmm.
great neighborhood." It's like an opportunity to even communicate with your neighbor.
Right.
And I think my experience has shown me a lot of times, and I was a lot guilty of this myself, is the fact that I would choose anger before seeing the opportunity. I
Wow.
would just be like, well, how dare you think that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. You want to respond with, well, do you live alone? you know?
yeah, right? That's like automatic response. And hey, if you have that response, hey, that's cool. I think it's just this is like an invitation to ask yourself, look, is that really how I want to respond?
Right.
Because you also have a choice of why would I want to spend so much time being angry? And I get there are things that we deal with that they should be handled by now. But I guarantee you, the more you show up and you're angry, like I'm gonna shut the door in your face. I'm not gonna want to deal with an angry
Right.
person.
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
always say I'd much rather I always try to approach things from as an opportunity to educate people and to again change the tone of conversation. If they come at me or they approach me in a certain way that's like an outdated way of thinking, it's like, yeah, people with disabilities can drive, and here's how I drive. I open my car door and say like it's called a hand control. It's called a hand control. The pedals are still there, so anybody can drive my car technically. And but how I drive my car is I use the hand control. And so I always use it as opportunities to educate and to raise that awareness and just help change their way of thinking. So it's uh, and yes, it does get very frustrating, and you do automatically sometimes have that, that fight back response where it's just like you
mhm.
want to, just lash out and yell at people. But most of the time, I can hold that in and say, like, okay, and try to see, like, okay, how did they really mean that statement? How did they really mean that question? Uh, and then again, try to approach it from a way of educating them and helping them better understand what my condition is and what it means for me. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm all about, like you said, using your energy in a in a positive way and just trying to stay away from the anger and the negativity is what works for me.
Yeah, right. And that's a perfect way to say that. It's about what works for you. And guess what? I already know there's plenty of people that are disagreeing with everything that
Absolutely.
I'm saying. And here's the thing, we need a little bit of everything. Like, what would work best is if you've got the people who are really good at the fighting, the getting attention, but on the back end, they're working with the people who can communicate without being in that emotional state. Because guess what? That emotional state is creating a big barrier in how you're actually communicating your message because you're all jacked up on the fight response and your brain's like shut off.
Right.
Um, so it takes everybody to make all this stuff win-win, I think.
That's a very, very good point, and that we all have our own lane to be in, I think. And some, like you said, some of us, that is the advocacy and the fighting and all of that, and which is needed, yes, because we do need people to stand and fight for us and make change in those ways. And then there are the other ways to express our frustrations and communicate, and there's room for everybody in these two in those spaces for sure. And
Hmm.
one thing that I also thought of was um, I always like to think that for that one encounter that I have, I may be the first and only person with a disability that they ever interact with. And
Yep.
I don't want them to, again, like I always try, I'll say, I always try to make that as pleasant. I know I don't owe that to anybody. But at the same time, I don't want them to leave the encounter they had with me saying like, oh wow, like he was a real jerk.
Okay, that wasn't the word I was gonna use,
It
but what?
wasn't either. I thought about it, but that's the word that came out, thankfully.
Yeah,
I did
absolutely.
I did
That
think about
resonates with me.
it.
And for me, it's like I've always felt a sense of obligation for
Mhm.
that same reason. I may be the representation of what it means to live with a disability for someone. I may be that representation. And like with great power comes great responsibility, right? Get a little bit of Spider-Man going on. And there is a sense of responsibility that I do feel when it comes to um, being a person with a disability. Like, I feel that because I know that there are people out there that don't have the same opportunities that I have when it comes to being out in public and being seen. And so that is really important to me, to show up in a way in which, based on my awareness that I currently have, I show up in the best light possible and represent the community well from my perspective.
So, as I mentioned, we did open up for questions from our followers, and one of the questions that you received um, was, "What would you say is your most frequent obstacle that you face?"
Yeah. Um, my most frequent obstacle is myself. In all honesty, it really is myself. From a different perspective, I think that the most frequent obstacle is pain management, because every minute of every day I'm in pain.
Hmm.
Um, and like I talked about earlier, about being really, really good at disassociating, and that's completely from knowing that, hey, this pain is here regardless. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be your friend for life. And so you got to figure out a way to deal with that. But what I want to share about that, I think it's one of the greatest gifts, actually, that I've been given, um, as being a coach, because what it allows me to see is that, like, if I'm talking to you, Art, and we're having a deep discussion and you're telling me all the stuff that's happening for you, and it might be painful situations that you're going through, I have a built-in mechanism where I can be like, oh yeah, that's not mine to deal with. I don't have to take that on at all. And it gives me a great, like, I can be present in that moment and not get caught up in what the other person is telling me. And that wouldn't be possible without that coping mechanism of being able to disassociate from my own stuff. I'm like, I can do it with myself. I sure as heck can do it when you're talking about your stuff.
Right. Yeah, and that's really really great that you're able to do that. So interesting that you chose those two things as obstacles, yourself and the pain management, because I would say like those are definitely two of my most frequent obstacles as well. It's
Let,
we're
let's dive into that, the self part for a second. I want to speak directly to people with disabilities right now. And when I say myself, I think the number one thing that comes up for me is the excuse, and I use that very purposefully, the excuse that somebody didn't like me, or that I didn't get this promotion or whatever because of my disability. I think that's one of the biggest ways in which I've stood in front of myself and blocked myself from stuff, because I made up a story that said, maybe it was in high school, where you see people talking off in a corner and they just happen to look in your direction, and you're like, oh man, they're talking about, I can't believe they're talking about me. And you know what? They're talking about me because I'm different and I've got a disability. How the hell do I know that's what they were talking about? But that's the story I made up. And tell me that doesn't resonate with you right now, sitting here, like, that is the hugest disservice that we do. But I think it takes experience to even be aware that that actually is happening. And it takes other people other than yourself to be able to look and say, huh, they're at a spot that I want to be at. And they have similar circumstances to me, but they're a lot further along than me. What did they do? How did they get there? What questions did they ask themselves other than, oh, this is my circumstance. It's not changing. So I'm just going to do nothing about it. I'm just going to let it stand in my way. And I'm going to let that make me a victim in my own life.
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely something I can say I've I've experienced for sure. Thankfully, not so much later in my life now, but yeah, high school and my younger years, yes, for sure. It was always those types of situations happening where it's just like, oh, they don't like me because of my disability, or as you said, which was always a big thing for me, the job situation. Oh, I didn't get that job because I was disabled. And it's just like maybe maybe it was true, but that should not that should not be the way of thinking about things, because it does stop you. Well, for me, I'll speak for me. It had definitely discouraged me from wanting to apply for other jobs, because that was just
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, okay, if this shit's just going to keep happening, then it goes back to what we said before. Maybe I should just sit and collect a check for the rest of my life, because the disappointment of going to job after job after job and not getting anything, um, it does start to, make you think like, okay, well, what is it about me that none of these people really like? And then it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe, yeah, it's probably because of my disability. Um, yeah.
I got a story, man. I got a story. So I used to, before being a loneliness coach, I used to work at a center for independent living. We would do a lot of work with high school kids
Hmm.
around the area of empowerment. And I remember this kid, man. He wanted to be a basketball player more than anything. He was like, "Yes, I'm gonna be a basketball player. I'm gonna, I'm gonna be in the NBA." And then it's like, I'm a practical realist, and I would like to consider myself in a lot of circumstances pretty empathetic, but the question was, okay, all right, so this is what you want to do. Are you on the basketball team? No. Uh, do you practice basketball after school? No. Um, well, so what you're telling me is the only thing that is related to basketball that you do is play this game on your phone. Yes. Yes. And it's like, okay, let's start looking at this a little bit. Don't ever say that it's because you have a disability that you didn't make it on the basketball team.
Right.
Because then you're just lying to yourself, and anybody telling you that is lying to you.
Hmm.
You didn't actually take the steps to do it. And that's one of the things that I tell the people that I work with all the time. Like, I get a lot of pushback sometimes with some of the stuff, and I'm like, hey, here's what I feel like you should do this. And I'll keep getting the same messages over and over. And I'm like, well, my stance hasn't changed. This is what I told you the first time. So my
Hmm.
question is, did you actually try it? No? Okay, so I don't have anything new to tell you. The circumstance isn't going to change. But the moment that you try, if you try it and you tell me, hey, here's what happened when I tried and it didn't work, then we get to look at things a little bit differently. But
Right.
I think we get stuck in thinking nothing's going to change, so why even try?
Right. Yeah. So true. I can definitely say that was my experience for a lot of things. Oh wow. Yeah. And then I love the basketball analogy.
He's
It's like, well,
just sitting there on his phone.
yeah, it's like, well, did you try out? Do you play? It's like, no. Well, you gotta do something to get something. So that's a
Yeah,
really,
man.
really, really great analogy. So again, thank you for your time today, and I always enjoy uh, your conversations, and again, being in Clubhouse and hearing the different topics that you talk about. So I just love the way that you can relate to different experiences and different things, and apply your own personal stories to to things, because I think it's so important that we can identify, or when we can identify things that come up for us in certain experiences that other people are discussing. We're recording this in July, which is more recently has become known as Disability Pride Month, which is a chance for people with disabilities to honor each individual's uniqueness, and each of us being a part, a natural and beautiful part of the human diversity. So, what would you say is something about you that makes you unique?
What's something about me that makes me unique? And that's a great question. Before I answer that, I
Yes.
want to also say this, since we're talking about disability pride. It's right on the line for me of the whole inspiration porn thing. A lot of people don't even know what the hell we're talking about, and like I had people, and I think it's just, I think for our community, we get to become better marketers, and we get to become better at speaking in terms that everybody can understand.
Right.
Um, because what I've found is most people relate anything with the word pride now to be related to the LGBTQ plus
Hmm.
community. And what we're celebrating is completely different than that, but that's what it gets tied to
Right.
in my experience and feedback that I've got.
Hmm.
So I just want to like throw that out as something for people to think about. Um, but what makes me uniquely me is I feel like my ability to listen, and also now my ability to look at situations and be curious and ask powerful questions that get to the root of what somebody's actually meaning. So powerful questions, I think, go a long, long way. And one of the things, like, because I'm talking to you, Art, I remember playing a game of Allegoria with you, and you said something, and it was based on your response in the question, but it was like, huh. So Art, why did you switch what you just called yourself?
I remember this. I remember that. It was something related to family, I think, and
Hmm?
in my family, I was always called Arthur because my dad was named Arthur as well, so they called him Art. They called me Arthur, and it was I believe the question was related to what would you tell your 5-year-old self, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Something, what would you tell your younger self? And I automatically responded with, well, I would tell Arthur but just about everywhere, even here, we're recording through this video app here. My name is Art Aston. Um, and that's how I have myself on my social media accounts as Art Aston. But when the question was asked about telling your younger self, I automatically said Arthur.
Yeah.
And I caught myself. And then, as you said, you are very good with asking the powerful follow-up questions. You asked me right away, why did you say that? What made you say that?
Yeah, so I think my ability to listen and to ask questions is
Uh-huh.
what makes me unique.
I would absolutely agree. You're definitely great at it. And with that, I will say thank you so much to my guest, Nathan Todd. I truly appreciate your time. I genuinely appreciated this conversation and gaining your perspective and hearing the things that you have to offer for about loneliness and being an inspiration. Can you please, as we wrap up, can you please tell people where they can find you on social media? And I know you also host a podcast as well. And can you please tell people where they can listen to that?
Yeah, so I'm driving everybody over to my Instagram. So if you've got Instagram, you can find me at The Real Nathan Todd. And if you want to listen to, it's interesting. I, for a long time, did a show, No Label Defines Me, because I'm all about labels. And I've kind of switched into conversations with the loneliness coach. And so if you want to listen to conversations with the loneliness coach, it's in my bio over on Instagram. You just got to click the link, follow the directions, and you'll get to hear all the conversations that we have over there. And oh my goodness, I can't wait. You can also find me on Clubhouse with the aforementioned Michelle Finan, Dr. Finan, Team Sexy and Disabled, where we have all kind of conversations around disability relationships, being sexy. Yesterday we talked about boundaries being sexy, and so I love that you've already talked with her.
Um, Very happy that you joined me today, and I look forward to talking with you and joining in on your Clubhouse conversations weekly. And have a great day. This concludes this episode of the OurView Podcast. We thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our YouTube channel. Make sure you're following us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for more disability-related content at OurView for Life. That's OurView, the number 4 LIFE. Thanks for listening.